Error's not good. Ah, there we are. We're green. Hello, we're back. Apparently we had an error, but then it went away. So, hope for the best, I suppose. So this next session, unfiltered design, going through the ID process with Cara North. Do you know what? There's loads to unpack here. I'm going to hand over straight away, and the stage is yours.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Tom. I really appreciate it. And there's been a ton of great sessions here today, and yesterday. So really excited to be here, support Tom, and support this awesome conference. And so I'm really excited to talk about my design process with you. And the best thing about talking about things like this is I can learn with you. So as we're going along, if you want to chime in and share some of the stuff that you do in your design process, I would also love to hear that as well. So this morning, Helen had a really nice session. Well, afternoon, evening, wherever you are, sorry. And she kicked off with kind of her ID journey. And the nice thing about tweaking a presentation right before you do it is you can make little changes. So Helen, I did this in vein of what you put out this morning, but I actually started my instructional design journey at Amazon. And so I worked at Amazon as an instructional designer right when Kindle was being created. So we actually still sold predominantly books back then. It's been that long. So I worked there and kind of got my formative education, if you will, around instructional design at Amazon. And then when I was there, I also started working in the evening at an adult education center. And one thing I really enjoyed about that role was I was able to help make connections for people. It was really valuable, like seeing kind of the light bulbs go off and knowing I was making a difference for adults who were looking for jobs and also needed their GED. So I did that also because, I like to be busy. And after I worked there, then I went to the Ohio State University, was in higher education for 7 years. And while I was there, I also backfilled and got my master's degree in adult education and then working on a PhD in learning technologies. But then the pandemic hit 2020, what I'm calling panic gaji. At least that's what I saw at the university level. And I knew I wanted to get out and go back into a corporate role. And so currently, forgot about that. So while I was also at Ohio State, I started my consulting business, The Learning Camel. So I consulted and went to school and worked full time. And then I decided in 2020 to go to Silfex, where I currently am. And so we are a division of Lam Research, which makes components for machines that manufacture semiconductors. And so a complete different field for me, which is great. And yeah, it's just been really fun. So why am I telling you all of that? Well, I'm telling you that because I think that my experiences and the places that I've worked and the populations that I've served has really, I think, shaped my design process. So because I do it a certain way doesn't necessarily mean that you have to do it this way. That's kind of the beauty of what we do is I think that there's multiple ways to approach the design process. So I just want to get that out there. You're like, well, why do you do that? I don't do that. I don't want to do that. That's fine. That's the beauty of the world. There's multiple opinions out there, and you can, do whatever it is that you want. So let's go ahead and hop into it. And I'm just going to take you through my ID process, okay? So first thing that usually happens is there's some kind of a request that comes in. And I'm prefacing this by saying also, I guess I should back up. I am giving you the perspective of someone that works for an organization and I'm in the learning and development department, okay? So this is kind of my perspective working in a learning development department in a corporate role. So also want to level set that. So you get the request. So that's pretty standard. I think somebody's communicating something to you that they need something, right? And so after I get the request and kind of massage that out, then we'll do the kickoff. And so the kickoff is kind of where I get more information. I start to kind of level set. And then if I've done the kickoff correctly, then I should be able to dovetail into the scope agreement. And in the scope agreement, again, I'm really focused on what it is that we need to accomplish, what is kind of the time frame, and all the bells and whistles of whatever. Now, This next step, I think, is a secret sauce, and I think it's something that not enough learning development professionals do. And I call it the shoes. The shoes. So I will kind of let that sit out there, let you think about that. What could she mean about the shoes? So I'll leave that out there and we'll get to it. After the shoes, then I do what I call the funnel. So, content, I think, in most organizations is pretty ubiquitous. So, how do I take all this content that I'm probably getting and funnel it down to make a learning experience? So, after the funnel, then comes the product. So, the product being, whatever it is that I create. Now, let me know in the chat, does this look kind of familiar to you? Does this seem like a good process? I'd love to know because I'm kind of talking into a vacuum here. Hi, Arena. Hi, Gabriella. Good to see both of you. Oh, thank you all. Well, I'm not done yet. that's only one part of the process. So I'm gonna keep going here. Hey, Alex, Irina, and Jeremy, appreciate it. So yeah, it's not done yet. Oh no, I got to keep going. So after I kind of create the product, then we go to the red pen phase, as I call it, to where we get feedback. And I want the feedback. I want all of it that I can. However, this is also a place that I see a lot of, especially new instructional designers, fall into some pitfalls. And so I want to talk about how you can help guide that if you're kind of newer to instructional design. And then the message. After we've kind of gotten the feedback, it's massaged, it's in a better way, at least closer to the final product. To me, it's often critical that you communicate why it's happening. And I think that's another thing that a lot of instructional designers kind of forget about, right? So we'll talk about why I think change management is really important whenever we're putting things together. And then the takeoff. And so this is when they get it and they go through it and all is right with the world, maybe, maybe not. Because another thing I think that people kind of forget about are the results, the evaluation part. So now I can say that is my entire process. Now I realize I use some maybe different terms and you're like, I don't know what you mean by that. It's kind of cryptic. So again, if you're newer to instructional design, you've probably heard of the ADDIE framework. So let me show you what this looks like as ADDIE, okay? Because I think that that's really important for you to maybe see. So if you're thinking about the analysis phase of what it is that I'm doing, it would kind of be these first three, okay? So I'm really focusing on what it is that I need to do, how we need to do it, and really making sure that I have enough information to kind of be dangerous, right? To go forward in the design process. For the design, the shoes and the funnel, they kind of have a little bit of an overlap there. So that would kind of be where, I say the true magic happens, right? That's when you like kind of put all the pieces together of the orchestra, so to speak. And then I would say, the funnel and the product are both a little bit in the development phase. So, what it is that you're building. Now, here's where it gets really fun. Going to the back side of my ID process, I definitely think you go back into the design and development phase if you're getting appropriate feedback. Now, I pride myself on my analysis. I love to ask questions. I'm really inquisitive about what it is that we need to do. So, I think I'm now at a stage where I wouldn't necessarily need to back into an analysis. However, I do think a lot of newer instructional designers might need to revisit the analysis after they get their first round of feedback, kind of depending on what happens with it. The message and takeoff, that's definitely the implementation. So how is it going to get to the end user? And then, of course, at the end, evaluation. However, I think there's pieces of evaluation peppered in to all of the phases of my ID process. So hopefully that kind of helps you get a sense of where I'm going. So let's dive in. So we're going to go back to the beginning. So the request, and it's so funny, but it's also kind of, anxiety driven when you get that request of, oh, I need a training solution. And I know in the beginning of my career, and I know specifically when I was at Amazon, I was a people pleaser. And if anybody needed anything, I wanted to stop what I was doing. I wanted to make the best product ever and just make everyone happy, right? And I found that wasn't always effective, right? I mean, that wasn't really what drove what I needed to do to be an effective designer. So I don't know about you all, but at least for me, here's some of the messages that I get. So I think there's like different kinds of people that will send you messages. So the first I'm going to call the prescriber, right? And so the prescriber is the person that's like, the sky is falling. I call them the chicken littles, right? Like, help me, the sky is falling. I need training now. Training is so important. I need it right now, right? Again, probably good intentions. Probably, their heart is in the right place. But let me know. Put an emoji in if you have prescribers in your organizations. If people are like, "Hey, I need it now," let me know. Okay, so there's several prescribers out there, but the friend or cousin of the prescriber is the, "Well, I already did it for you, and you should be grateful" person, right? So this person realizes that our department is busy. They know that there's a lot of stuff going on. They're like, "Hey, Cara, we need this. I went ahead and made this amazing PowerPoint for you. Just upload it in the LMS. Get it out of here. Set it 30 days out. We'll make it work." That's exactly what folks need. All right. So does anybody get any of those people? Let me know either in the chat or by emoji if you have people that do it for you. And again, their heart's probably in the right place, right? And I think that there's a lot of people that don't really understand the nuances and the reasons why we do what we do. And so one thing that I have been battling in multiple organizations I've worked at is the idea that content equals training. And there is this amazing quote by Dr. Michael Allen. I love it so much. It's actually in my email signature at work that says, "If content was enough, we would only have libraries and not schools." And I love that. That is something that's just kind of, resonated with me. And I just think that tells us why we do what we do. So, regardless if it's a prescriber or somebody that's like, "I just did it, you should be grateful," I kind of have the same response every time. Okay. So here's how I manage those requests when I get them coming in. So first thing I do, obviously, I'm polite about it. I say, "Thank you. We really appreciate the fact that you're interested in this." And then I go directly into, we have processes in place to make sure that we're managing our workload. Now, I am currently the head of the learning and development team at my organization, so I can push a little bit harder here. I have had to in the past when people have elevated stuff up to me, I have had to have these conversations if people aren't kind of taking it. But I explain it in a way of, if you were to buy something at work, there's a process you have to do. If you want to hire somebody at work, there's a process that you have to do. So why wouldn't we have a process as well? And so usually when I kind of frame it in that way, I was like, "Oh yeah, I guess that makes sense. You all probably do need a process." And I really focus on coming from a place of curiosity. And one thing I'm very fortunate to have currently in my role is I do have a leadership coach that my company provides us that meets with several of us in the organization, and he's really helped me work on the way that I phrase things and the way that I approach things. And so when you come from a place of curiosity, seeking to understand, that's really hard to misinterpret, right? If you're like, "Hey, you need to do it this way," it can kind of come across a little bit combative, but really seeking to understand is something that's really important. Now, again, where I'm going to talk about differing opinions here. So after we kind of have that conversation, I guide them to our intake form. Now, Tim Slade, I'm sure many of you know that name, he has a community for e-learning developers. And this was a question he had in his community, and I popped in and talked about it, about, are training intake forms necessary and good? And so Tim is of the school of thought, no, they're not. But here's a different perspective. I think that they are good. And I'll show you why I think they're good and why we use them. But we use them for a couple of different reasons. The first is, I'm not a mind reader. I like to, kind of know what I'm getting into. But you can tell very quickly if somebody has an adverse reaction to this, what kind of subject matter expert or person they're going to be, right? So if you know that they're going to have, trouble with this and they're combative about it, saddle up. It's going to be a rodeo. Versus if somebody is, really kind of excited and said, "Sure, I'll give you more information," then they're probably going to be a good partner. So at least you kind of know going in a little bit more information about them. So here is what I like to have in my training intake form, okay? So these are critical questions. This is directly from the intake form that we use in my current organization. First question, what's the purpose, right? So what is it that you're trying to get at by making something, right? So what is it that you're wanting to get to? Another big one, what business problem is this solving? I work in a manufacturing environment. It is very black and white when it comes to metrics, and it is a very metric driven organization. And so that's a question that is a great question to ask because you want to make sure that you're getting some information to make sure that this experience is going to be set up for success. Another question I like to know, like, is this something new or is this like a refresh? And if it's a refresh, how old is it? What's the shelf life of it? Where's the content at? And sometimes they don't know this, and that's fine. But again, I'm trying to gather as much information as possible to when I go into that kickoff meeting, I have some information that hopefully I have went through and I'm a little bit more informed. Another question is, who needs to be involved here? Like, who are the stakeholders? Does it need to be signed off by people? Do they know that they need to be involved in that? That's another critical question. Sometimes they just assume, oh, yeah, that person 2 offices down needs to be involved, but then the person 2 offices down isn't ever told they need to be involved. That's always a fun conversation. And then my favorite question is, what have you done to try to solve it yourself? Now, what you'll find a lot of times is a lot of the things that people think are training issues truly aren't. Okay. A great example that I have about this, and this is from, my work experience is, I got a request in about training about handling something in our organization. So like part of the things that we create, like there's a part of it where they need to go through and do a cleaning of it. And they said, people are making errors, they're scratching the product. There's got to be something wrong here, Cara. Like, we need better training. And so I was still new to the organization at the time. And I said, can you take me out there? So I put on my PPE, I put on my steel toe boots, my glasses, my gloves, everything. I walk out there, and I know you all can't tell, but I am vertically challenged. I'm not a very tall person myself. And where they were having to put this, it was, I could not lift it above my head. And I'm short, but then there were other people that it would be very hard for someone to lift what it was over their head up to the shelf that needed to go to. And I just said, have we thought about getting like a little stool or something? Or have we thought about having shelving a little bit lower that it's easier for people to lift on? They're like, no, that's a great idea. So had we taken the time to build a training, that wouldn't have helped because that wasn't the problem that was causing some of the issues in that particular department. It was an environmental issue, right? And so I think it's really critical that we ask these questions. Not that we don't trust our stakeholders, but sometimes they have tunnel vision and they only know what they know. And so if we can ask these questions out of the gate and get them thinking about it, it's going to make a better product at the end if they still need our help. Sometimes they don't need our help, and that's fine too. I don't have a problem talking to people, giving them their time, because ultimately, still at the end of the day, I'm helping the business by having those conversations, and I'm helping us do better in our work. All right, so they went through all of that. We're assuming that they filled out that intake form. And so now we're going to talk about the kickoff. Okay. And so the kickoff is, I think, really critical. This is how we kind of set the expectations of the partnerships. And so for us, we actually use action mapping. And so every one of my team has a copy of the book. I have the book right here. It's by Kathy Moore. And I love it so much. I even got our general manager of the company bought in on this. This was one of the most critical things that I did as a leader in the company is I got their buy-in on Map It. So first thing we do in that kickoff is we say, how is this training going to impact the bottom line? And again, for us, manufacturing, it's very cut and dry. We have specific metrics that we track, including, how much product is out the door, how much product was damaged in the manufacturing process, how quickly do we create the product. There's all kinds of different metrics we can use. So we map it to whatever metric it is that we think this training is going to impact, and then we build out the key performance indicator, the KPI, okay? And if we can't do that for this training, we don't do it. We don't do it. We have to have something that we can go back when my boss asks me, hey, what did that impact? How are you tracking it? I need to have data for my boss. Okay. It's that important. So after we kind of massage that out and get that out of the way, then 3 critical questions. All right. What's the problem and what's success look like? So how do we know when we solved it? Right. What is it that people need to do? And again, another great question, specifically thinking about environmental behavior issues, et cetera. Why aren't they doing it? If someone doesn't hold someone accountable, that is not a training problem. That is a problem with personnel. If somebody has a bad day and blinks a couple times and misses something, that is a human error that happened maybe one time. That's not necessarily a training problem. You can't train people to stop blinking when they need to, right? So asking that is very, very critical. And again, you will find, it's just absolutely fascinating to me since we've adopted action mapping at work. It's just fascinating to me what we uncover. We feel like we're like undercover detectives sometimes, really like finding these really interesting, fascinating stories. And then after we kind of uncover some of that, what is really needed? And how can they practice what they can do? Okay. So again, this isn't a content dump. All right. We're not in the business of delivering them more of the same. We want it to impact what it is that they are currently doing. We want to make them better. We want to support them. So if you have never heard of action mapping, I cannot say enough good things about it. Highly recommend it. And it is a great book. All right. So after we've had that, so we talk to them, we set kind of the parameters of, what success looks like. Then we have the conversation of the scope. Okay. And so this is super critical. Again, another thing that I think new instructional designers fall into pitfall. Nothing you create can be successful without the support of others. Okay. You cannot design in a vacuum. You can't. The minute you do, that's when you miss a lot of critical things and there's a lot of undue pressure on yourself for success. You need the partnerships of people in the business. Got to have it. Got to have that buy-in. Okay. And you have to work really hard sometimes to build that trust. For me, it was so challenging coming in. I was brand new in my role. My department was brand new in my organization. And I came in the middle of the pandemic where I wasn't allowed to come on site for, I think, 4 months. And I had to try to build relationships with people via like Microsoft Teams. And oh, by the way, this company was brand new to remote work. Remote work was never a thought in their mind. So it took me a long time to build those relationships because of that. And had it been a different environment, maybe it would have been a little bit easier, but you have to build those relationships. And so when you're building out this scope agreement, here are some of the key components I think you need to hit. So one is, who's in charge of maintaining it? Now, what I mean by that is, at least again, I'm using my organization as a baseline. Things change very rapidly. Okay, we're in manufacturing, we're testing new products, we're doing a bunch of research and development. So if there's a new way of doing something, if there's a new machine that we purchase, et cetera, how are we going to get notified of that? Who puts all that content together? Who is basically maintaining kind of the change of the business? Okay, and what does that look like? my favorite question to ask, and this was something that my skip level kind of instilled in me when I was at Ohio State: who's doing what by when? That is like one of my favorite project management questions. All right, what are you doing? What are you doing? And, when will you have it done and what support do you need? And this one is another critical one. So, what are the consequences if a component gets missed? And so, what happens with current projects we're working on, if we can't get a hold of the stakeholder and we're working on it, we scoot it over. We have a column, and I'll show you an example of our project management, but it's not going to be like, I'm not going to show you the one that I have at work, but we actually have a column in our project management table called stuck in the sludge. And guess what happens when your project gets moved to stuck in the sludge? We can't continue to drive that conversation because we have other engaged stakeholders in the business that we need to work with. So we warn them, hey, you're getting ready to be moved over into the sludge. And then if we don't hear anything, and so hopefully they'll reach out at some point. But again, we are so busy, we just can't continue to drive that conversation. So this is not what we use, but I just wanted to show you an example of kind of how it's set up. This is very similar to the way that we have it set up. So this would be our stuck in the sludge, what's currently in design, the to-do. We have onboarding that we're in charge of as well. And so that's kind of an ongoing project that we have. And so, some of the stuff that we need to do for onboarding is usually in there, kind of what's in the mix, what's being worked on, what's kind of going through the testing process, and then what have we accomplished for the year. And I love this column specifically because when my boss asked, hey, what has your team done in the last quarter, I can just expand it out and show boom, 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 boom. Beautiful. So if you are not a project manager, I will tell you, if you are looking to pivot into L&D leadership, hone those skills now, okay? Hone them now, because if you're going to pivot in, this will be a really big part of the work that you do on a daily basis. All right. So hopefully you're still curious about what I mean by the shoes. And so this is something, again, that I think that a lot of people are kind of scared of. And I don't want you to be scared of it because I'm going to break it down, I think, pretty simply for you today. But another pitfall that I find new designers fall into is you are not the end user. Okay. Just because you like retro video game graphics doesn't mean it needs to go into your experience. Just because you really like a cool track on Epidemic Sound with some sick beats doesn't mean that your end user is going to like it. Okay. For your design to be successful, it has to involve the end user. Okay, it has to. Otherwise, what is the point of what it is that you're putting together? So, I believe in the dark art, as I call it, of task analysis. And task analysis, that's a good old instructional systems design term. I was formally kind of trained in task analysis during my time at Ohio State, and it's something that I've kind of brought into my design process ever since. And so, what task analysis does is whatever it is that we're creating the learning experience for, we are breaking it down. Okay, so I'm going to break down kind of what I mean by task analysis. So the first thing in a task analysis, and I'm just going to use an example throughout. Let's say that we're doing a training on how to create a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Okay, and so what would be some steps in that? The first step would probably be gather the ingredients, like a loaf of bread, jar of peanut butter, jar of your jelly choice. Let me know if you prefer grape or strawberry in the chat. Why not? And then obviously, a knife or something to spread it with, right? So that would be a step that one would do in making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Now, once you have that step, I'm with you, Deborah, I like strawberry too. What is the performance measure? Meaning, how do you know if you did it correctly? Okay, so again, peanut butter and jelly sandwich, I've gathered my ingredients. I know that I did it correctly if I don't have to go get something else, right? So I have the knife, I have the bread, I have the peanut butter, I have the strawberry jelly, okay? Although, Jennifer, I agree, banana is also very good with it too. tools, equipment, materials. So what do I need to execute it? So in this case, again, I'll need like a knife or something to spread it with. So again, I think you're probably starting to see why this is important for our end users, right? So if they need something specialized, like if they need a specific computer software to do something, right? That could be a reason why they're maybe not doing it correctly. Maybe they need additional support in that software program. You just never know until you kind of start to deconstruct what this is. Then on top of that, what is it that they need to know to do it, right? So for a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, I'll need to know how to use a knife to dip it in to spread it out. And then I'll need to do the same for the peanut butter. And then I'll probably also need to know what it is that I prefer if I'm the one that's eating the sandwich, or if it's for a loved one. Do they like a little bit of peanut butter, a lot of jelly, a lot of peanut butter, a little bit of jelly? So it just kind of depends on what it is that they need. Safety. Is there any safety concerns? And again, my bias, I'm in a manufacturing facility, safety is paramount. There are a lot of bad things that could happen to people in the organization that I work at from a safety perspective. So safety is always important. Is there any protective equipment that they need? Is there anything they need to be worried about around electrical or, water or anything like that? That's really important, again, to document the decisions. And so what I like about this is these are questions kind of internally or externally that they're asking to execute the task. So like I said before, like, well, how much is enough peanut butter? Like, do I have enough peanut butter? Do I have enough jelly? Does the person like the crust? Do I need to cut the crust off or not? Do they want it split in half? So these are kind of these like little internal dialogues that people have with each other, consciously or unconsciously, I guess, as they're going through the motions with it. And then the most critical part of this, you all, and this is my favorite, is I call this the goofy McGoof. How am I going to mess it up? Okay. And what is so critical about the errors is this is a wonderful place to get scenarios, assessments, extra information, because that people mess up a lot during this step. So, somebody might not put enough peanut butter on, or not enough jelly, or they didn't cut the crust off when they should have known better because that person doesn't like the crust, right? So, this is so critical. And what I find fascinating when I work with people going through this process, usually it takes a little bit, like, they're kind of slow about getting these kind of filled in as you're going through, but oh, do they have the stories to tell you of the errors. Oh, I remember when that person just made a big goof and they messed everything up, etc. But those stories, again, give you real life work context of what someone will be doing in this particular task to make your learning experience more authentic and make your learning experience stick with that end user. Okay. So I cannot tell you how critical this is. And this is, again, my favorite part. I don't know if you're familiar with like the Nationwide commercials about Mayhem, the guy that like messes everything up. Like, that's what I always picture in this. Like, I'm going to mess everything up today. How can I mess it up? So I hope that that is helpful. I think it's super critical. This is something, again, I think a lot of instructional designers skip because they're taking SMEs at their word, or they're getting that content out. But really having these conversations with people doing the work is critical. Okay. All right, so we've made it. We did a task analysis of it, and now we get to do the funnel. All right, so now we have all this content. We have an old PowerPoint. We have a 3-ring binder. We have work instructions, standard operating procedures, all of the things, right? So how do we determine what goes into what we're creating? Well, first thing, I don't think you should ever throw anything away. I highly recommend just keeping it. Even if you don't use it, just stick it somewhere, because you never know when it might come in handy, especially as you're evaluating. If you see that there are gaps still on a particular topic, maybe you could extrapolate some of that information for that, okay? But the real key for me for creating the learning experience is very simple. If what you have doesn't contribute to that goal, again, remember that KPI that you set, it stays out of it. Okay. So it really has to be focused on what it is that somebody needs to do to impact whatever that goal is. Okay. That is, again, a very hard lesson, I think, especially for new instructional designers, because again, you're a people pleaser. You really want to make it, fun and cute and engaging. But if it can't match to whatever it is that you're trying to impact, it's not going to be effective. Okay. All right. So finally, after all of that, I mean, you're still with me. Hopefully, you're still with me. You create it. Really? Is it that easy? No, not necessarily. So I'm going to show you some different examples of things. Again, I have a really wicked NDA at my current establishment, so I can't share too much, but I'll share some stuff that I've made throughout my career. Okay. So the first one here, this was when I was at Ohio State. I created a little story to go along with how people learn. Specifically, there was this little story about a child that was learning vocabulary, and he saw things as a dog, but then like his parents said, well, they took him to the zoo. Hey, that's not a dog, that's a wolf. And then the kid's like, oh, what's the difference between a dog and a wolf? So I created this little story of this little boy that went around, and he was going through kind of the process. And so this was built in Storyline, and we embedded it into the learning management system. And for this particular one, the goal really was to kind of tell a story, because before that they had their textbook embedded in the LMS, pages and pages and pages of educational psychology text, which is somewhat interesting. But again, if you're a graduate student, you're probably burned out. You probably don't want to read everything. But this story really just kind of applied those principles in a way that they could remember, oh, yeah, that's what a schema is, or oh, that's what that means, etc. So that is what I made for something like that. Another one, this was also something I made at Ohio State, this was a project that I was a part of, where we were writing end of course assessments for career technical education courses in the state of Ohio. So all K through 12, well, actually, it's high school, I guess, students in the state of Ohio, if you take like a welding course or home economics or et cetera, if they passed an end of course exam, they could get some credit for it, I believe, depending on how that got set up for college. But here's the rub. Their teachers, part of their effectiveness score was based on how their students did in these courses. And so the interesting thing about career technical educators is they often come into teaching through an alternative path. They may not be formally educated in education, but they are experts in, welding, home economics, computers, etc. So this was to basically show them how writing multiple choice questions can really be difficult, specifically if you break various rules. And so for this one, especially, this one is what I call the Jeopardy clue. So, having bag here and having bag here, it tells you that it's probably going to be the correct answer, because it gives you like a little clue. But on standardized tests, there's not clues like that, right? And so we really wanted to make something that was fun and engaging for the teachers of Ohio to go through, so they could remember some of these common pitfalls in writing multiple choice assessments. And this turned out really awesome. I ended up winning a couple awards for it, one from the Learning Guild, then one from the Association for Education, Communication, and Technology. So I can be that person and say I'm an award-winning instructional designer. Yeah, okay. And then this one is one from my current role. And so one of the first things that I worked on in my new role was we got rid of Skype and we transitioned to Microsoft Teams. And so we did a virtual instructor-led training, very meta, in Teams. And so basically I was the one that facilitated it. I put together like this little facilitation guide with this little job aid, just to show them kind of how they navigate through it. And again, the population that I work with, a lot of them are a little technology adverse. It just takes them a little bit, which is fine. So just wanted to support them and give them guidance in switching to the new platform. I thought, how meta if I do this in the platform that we're training on. And then I gave them little challenges in it. So I started off with, I let them pick where we were going to go if they wanted to learn more about meetings or chat first. And then I had them like go in into like a little fake meeting. And then I had them edit a document, I think, all together, and then also send messages to people. So yeah, I wanted them to use it as we were going through it. So this was a virtual instructor-led training about Teams. But again, a lot of the same things that I've talked about up to this point led me to creating these experiences. All right. So the fun now begins about the red pen. So let me know in the chat if you have what I call some super SMEs. And these are the folks that, oh yeah, whatever you want to do, I trust your judgment. But as soon as that thing is out for review, they nitpick everything. Does anybody deal with that? Maybe it's just me. I don't know. So I okay. I see some people are like, yeah, okay. So what we have adopted is we basically have what's called level 1 feedback that we look at, okay? And so what we're doing here is when we send it out for review to the stakeholders is we're focusing on 4 different components. Is it accurate? Are we using the proper terminology? You know, is this something that someone new can go through and understand? And then spelling and grammar, okay? That's it. That's it. And I truly mean that's it. So when we get what I call level 2, I don't like that shade of blue. You need some Disney instrumental music in here. And, you know, that second section, you might want to have a little bit more spacing around the alien head. Nah, we can get that maybe in the next iteration, but we really, again, want to focus on getting it out the door and getting it in front of people, okay? Because again, the little alien head clip art may or may not make that big of a difference. So that has been something that we have really been trying to train our subject matter experts on a little bit more of. We're not saying that this doesn't matter. We care about your opinion. However, we need to get it out the door. So what's more critical are these things, okay? So we do that, and then we also do have a team review. So the entire team goes through it. We usually give ourselves like a couple of days to go through it, and we actually use TechSmith has a really neat product, and now I think it's Review, it's what it's called, that you can actually upload a video into it, and it has like a little overlay where people can comment. We use that. And then if we're using Articulate Storyline, we pop it over in Review where people can make comments on the side. And that works out really nice. Yes, thank you, Jane. TechSmith Video Review. Really love that. Just recently bought that, and it's really cool. So, also, in addition to that, that's not enough. We also want to focus on language and accessibility. Susie Miller had a fantastic presentation about this just a little bit ago, but you know, we want to make sure that it's going to be able to be used by everyone. And that's something that's really critical, especially in the organization that I'm in, because I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Our plant is loud, very loud, and they also can't have earbuds in on the floor. And so it's so critical everything does have captions, and that, you know, if we have something that has a transcript with it, you know, so that way they can get what they need in that moment. So that's something that we're very passionate about as well. Okay, so go through all of that. And then this is also something I think that is missed a lot by new instructional designers. How are you going to tell them it's coming, right? I don't think anyone logs into their learning management system or they're like, oh man, let's learn something new today. I can't wait to see the new courses that's on there. That doesn't happen. I mean, I love learning and development, and I don't do that. I mean, I don't think anybody does. So the message is really critical here, okay? And so how are they going to know that it's out there and why? So adults always kind of want to know the why behind something, right? That they want to know, why is this coming? Why is it impacting them? So I'm very fortunate currently where we're at is we work in tandem. We have a communications team, and that communications team has a couple different little things that we go through. And so here are some of the things that we focus on with them. So, how's it going to be communicated? It's usually multifaceted. We put in an email, but then people don't read it. We have a system that everybody has to log into on the floor. We can put it like in a little pop up in there. We've used that before. We have digital signs around our plant, so we'll put it out there. And then, as old school as it sounds, we still use flyers sometimes because each part of the plant has like a board that they can actually, we can hang it on. And then we also have little stands like where everybody has to check in with the front desk to go through kind of the COVID protocol, get your temperature scanned and all that before you go in. We can display, a piece of paper there explaining some stuff. So we have multiple ways to get it out. And I think that that's really critical. In a past life, when I was in Amazon, I actually used to make things for urinals, like little signs above urinals and then also on the back of stalls. Because, before cell phones were really popular, you had a captive audience. So, why not put it there? So I can't emphasize enough how important the communication part is. Specifically, why is it happening, right? So what's going on? Why are we doing it, right? So what is it that this is trying to impact? That's super important. And we even take it a step further, the business priority. So for us, each quarter in our organization, we have like 4 priorities that we focus on as a business collectively. And so we also try to map whatever we make to those 4 business priorities for the quarter. One of them should be impacted by it. And then the roles and responsibilities, how does it impact you? And then what are the next steps of what it is that you need to do in order to be successful with this? So again, I think change management is a wonderful thing. I think it's something that, again, because people have their head down and they're overwhelmed with a lot of the stuff, especially new instructional designers. Please don't think that I'm picking on you, but it is really important to focus on how it's communicated to the audience, because if you put something out there, you don't explain that, you're going to get the eye rolls, you're going to get the resistance, and it's just not going to be a good time for anybody. So I think that that's really critical. All right. So once we have it communicated, we have those dates in there, we know when it's launching, how do we deliver it to the users? And so there's a lot of different ways that we do this. We typically make an implementation plan. Specifically, we look at a couple of different factors. So what data is needed for the launch. Again, what's the date? Who does it need to go to? That's a big thing too. Our company continues to grow. There's so many people in our company now, so we want to make sure that it is custom tailored to the audience it needs to go to. We don't do what I call the spray and pray anymore. Does everybody know what I'm talking about? Where everybody gets the dose of training today. Yeah, no, that's not effective either, right? So don't spray and pray people. Target who it needs to go to. Super important. Okay. The metadata, I think, is also very critical. And so, one thing that you will not find in any learning experience that I create, and hopefully the team creates now, is we do not start it with the learning objectives. We put the learning objectives in the metadata, meaning if they open it up in the LMS or in the communication, we'll share what the goals of the experience are, but we do not waste the precious beginning of the experience boring them to tears with the learning objectives, okay? They'll be able to get that in the metadata. And again, I know that might be somewhat controversial, but again, in my opinion, this is how I do it. So if others do it a different way, love to hear that as well. But just myself, I don't do it that way. And then another thing too is we also do usability testing. So after we pop it in the LMS, we test it. We have like little tasks that we do. So our LMS administrator on the team is incredible. Love her. She does great work. And she gives each of us like different little roles. And so she's like, okay, you're going to fail this 2 times and then you're going, so we have like little things that we do for that just to test how things work appropriately in that before it gets launched. So it has multiple eyeballs before it gets pushed out to the world because we want to make sure that it is as accurate as possible. All right. So the best part, the results, right? So after you put it out there, people went through it, who cares? What did it matter? So I'm going to share with you some of things that have really made an impact on me from an evaluation standpoint. Now, again, this may be somewhat controversial, but I challenge you to be at a higher standard than a vanity metric. And I'm talking about a net promoter score. Net promoter score is, on a scale of 1 to 10, how likely are you to recommend this to somebody? Tell me, what's the difference if somebody says a 5 or a 6 or a 3 or a 4? What's that matter? Does that impact the business? Do you think I could give that metric? Oh, hey, boss, they said that they gave us a 7. Okay. What does that mean for the bottom line of what it is that we're doing? My boss would be like, no, that's not, that's not a good, like, what do you mean a 7, right? So I challenge that thinking, and I think it's really rotten advice when somebody's like, "Oh, net promoter score." If somebody says, "Oh, we get a 9.5 on our training," okay, great. That means they liked you. Congratulations. That doesn't tell me if they learned anything, if the behavior has changed, if it impacted them in any way. Okay, so you are better than a vanity metric. So the evaluation guru is Dr. Will Tallheimer. When I read this book, it changed my instructional design life. I wish I would have read it earlier in my career, but I'm making up for lost time. So what are some questions that maybe you could ask on the evaluation to give you some good data? So this is one that we have on our evaluations. This is really important because we want to know, can they apply the content to their job? Super important, right? Because if they can't, we can't impact that metric that we set at the beginning. So some of the answers, and again, it's not a 1 to 5, but they have different responses. So this is like a general awareness, but they need more practice or experience to do the job tasks. Guess what that tells me? We can follow up with those people. It's wonderful. It's amazing what you can do with good evaluation. You get the name of the person, you see that they mark this, then you can have like a little conversation or push something out to that person to make sure that they get additional support. Because isn't that what we're in the business of doing? Like, aren't we supposed to help people? I think we forget about helping people at the evaluation stance. Oh, we'll just take their data and we'll just do better next time. No, people need our support, right? I mean, we're in it for the long haul, hopefully. So I love this question because we're able to target this as well as the hands-on too. We're able to partner with our on-the-job trainers to make sure that people have additional support. And you all, they feel heard here. People actually like it when they get follow-up. Crazy, right? Have you ever filled out a survey and been surprised if somebody reached back out? I know I have, but that is the kind of L&D department that I want to be a part of, right? Because we want to support our end users. Another question that we have is, how well do you feel like you understand what we said? So maybe that might even be I probably should switch these. A precursor is, do you have the content and can you apply it? And so here's some of the responses that they can choose. So again, if they have confusion or they're at a basic here, this is like a lower level. We can follow up with those people. We can get them extra support. We can see what it is that they need to get to that solid or competent level. And then the other cool thing is if somebody down here says they're comprehensive or expert, then maybe that's a stretch assignment opportunity for somebody to say, hey, you said that you feel good about this. Would you like to help our learning and development team and, maybe get out of production for a few hours to support people? Don't underestimate the value of this too, especially for building champions in your business, because a lot of people kind of feel like they're in dead end jobs, they don't have any like promotion opportunities. This is a wonderful way to involve people. And again, I've learned a ton when I've been able to do something like this, tips and tricks that I didn't know during the development process, and I learned with them, which is really cool. All right. So Tom does not know this is coming. I actually signed this yesterday, but I thought, what better way to share some really great news that next year coming, I am writing a book. It's called Learning Experience Design, Designing for Users and Impact, and it is going to be published through ADDIE Press. So if you like this content, this is actually going to be a big base of the book, what you saw today, going in a little bit deeper about what this means and how you can make sure that you are focusing on the users and then also focusing on the impact. So I'm really excited about this. And again, just happened last night. So really, really super fresh, and you all are the first to know. So with that, I'll turn it over to you all. I'm sorry I didn't do as good of a job keeping up in the chat, so hopefully Tom can help me with that. Look forward to connecting with you. I'm everywhere. LinkedIn's usually the easiest way to get a hold of me, although I do have a YouTube channel called Unfiltered ID, and then I have a podcast with my friend Joe Suarez called Instructional Redesign. So with that, hopefully, Tom, you can come back on and help with some Q&A. But thank you all so much. It's been a pleasure spending some time with you, especially on a Saturday. And this is the first time I've ever presented this, and hopefully it was helpful.
Well, yeah, I think that was. I think everyone else is bearing me out on the emoji side there, but yeah, this book was awesome, and that's fantastic news about the book. It'll be a book clearly worth buying. I toyed with the idea of a joke about how dare you promote something here.
It just happened yesterday. Come on, and it's related.
Of course, that's awesome. Yeah, so there's been some Q&A action going on. So let's pull some of that up. I guess okay. One appears to advance itself. There was this one from YouTube actually, which was Cynthia from YouTube asked when your main stakeholder or client don't know exactly what they need. Since IDE role, how do you convince real need? I'm thinking it's how do you get to the real need when your stakeholder or client don't really know, which is not that uncommon, is it?
No, it's totally not that uncommon. Usually what questions I do for that, Cynthia, is, who else needs to be involved? Like who else maybe would have some more information? So I think it's really critical making sure that you have the right people at the table at that kickoff. That's why I asked for that question in the intake form. But sometimes they don't know until they start talking, like, oh yeah, maybe we should involve the person down the hall with that. So, being a little bit flexible of that, I think is really important. But then also another thing that I think is important is being able to talk to the experiences that you've had at the organization. So putting together, like, for lack of a better, like a little dossier of, hey, this is what we did on this project, this is what we did on this project, just explaining a little bit more, not to get them thinking that that's what they need as an end product, but explaining out how it works for others. Sometimes that's also beneficial too. But yeah, it's definitely a challenge, especially when they're like, I don't know what I really need, right?
Awesome. And there a couple of people have actually asked about slide deck, but I'm not sure if you're like me, where you're like, the slides on their own don't really tell the story I want them to, and whether or not you
They
share your slide
don't,
decks.
but what I could do, I'll stop sharing. They're Google Slides. I'll just share them right now. I'll put the link in the chat. I don't care
Oh,
if people want them.
awesome.
It's fine.
Wow, there we go. That's
Yeah.
awesome. Mark's answered. Fantastic.
All right, here it comes.
And obviously, I know there was as kind of the question asked, there was a lot to unpack there as well. So you can always rewatch this if you want to come back and pull out the snippets of wisdom that were in there, or just argue over which was the best kind of jam. But any other questions while we've still got a minute? I'm not going to say it's a one-off opportunity because, as you say, Cara, you are everywhere. There's so much opportunity to speak to you. It's always nice. No, nothing on YouTube, nothing on Twitch, and nothing here. Also, no questions.
Okay.
Okie doke. Well, thank you ever so much for taking
pleasure.
the time out and speaking. It's been awesome.
Yeah, thank you all. Really appreciate it. Again, look forward to connecting and stay tuned. And then one last thing, real quick. I did actually start an IDDIE community cohort. So if you're new to instructional design and would like to be part of a cohort of people going through actually updating an old training manual to making something more modern, connect with me and I will give you the information about that if that's something you're interested in.
We'll make sure we've got links to that in the Discord as well, because I know there were a few people around yesterday who aren't here today that were asking about how do I break into IDDIE, how do I develop these skills. So that would be an amazing opportunity. Super. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our next session is in 5 minutes, and it's We Don't Need No More Stinking Data with Anya. This is going to be another really great session. See you then.
Excellent. Thank you all.